up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another podcast episode on Holistic and Spiritual AF. Welcome to this podcast. If this is your first time landing on this podcast, you are definitely in the right spot. If you like talking about topics or hearing about topics such as how to connect with your ancestors, how to activate your divine feminine codes, metaphysics, esoterics, we go in over here on this podcast. So be sure to hit that like, that follow, that subscribe. This podcast drops every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the first and the third Friday of the month, I have a guest come in sharing their wisdom, their expertise, their guidance. On the second and the fourth, I come in with my downloads and transmissions. So definitely make sure you're following me. This podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere that podcasts are syndicated. So you'll definitely want to make sure you're plugged in to one of those spots so you never miss a episode, okay? And if you are tuning back in, welcome back, fam. I appreciate each and every one of you, okay? This podcast is growing, and that is because of listeners like each and every last one of you, and I appreciate each and every one of you, okay? So with that being said, last night was like I'm buzzing high still from the class last night. So if you guys missed that, make sure that you check out my website at holisticandspiritualaf.com so that you can stay up on what's happening with the classes. We got a community now, like things are just really growing. Okay. And of course, I'll have all that information down in the description so that you can check it out down there as well. Okay. All right. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. Today is episode 80, and we're going to talk about stop asking spirit for signs you're ignoring. Okay. This one right here, this one probably is going to tap a few people and rub them raw, myself included sometimes, because a lot of times we hear people, particularly people who are on their path, no matter where they are, really, if they're in the beginning of the path, if they're in the middle or at the end, and they're receiving these messages, they're receiving these signs, and they're like, what does that mean? And they're trying to decipher what everything means, but instead of taking action and doing the work, okay? Because in each episode, and I say this all the time, I say you got to do the work. And then if my guests are on the podcast, at some point in the conversation, they also say you got to do the work. There's no cheat codes. Okay. So we're going to talk about that today because I think a lot of people are experiencing this and they're probably figuring out like now what. And so we're going to talk about what to do after you start to receive these signs. Okay. And we're going to break these down. And if you know me, I take everything from an Afro-Indigenous perspective. So I like to go into definitions so that we can kind of really break down what it is that we're talking about, okay? And I come from a Western understanding, and then I also come into the Afro Indigenous perspective so that you can kind of see the similarities, but the differences and why they're different, okay? So, in a Western understanding, when we're talking about signs, okay, and we're talking about spiritual gifts or these things that are coming, from somewhere, we're talking about intuition, subconscious awareness, synchronicities, pattern recognition, basically your mind and body picking up on things before you consciously process them. Okay. So this is going to be from a Western understanding. And so this is going to be things like repeating numbers, seeing 111, 222, 444, gut feelings, dreams, coincidences. So all of that on the Western side is kind of described as synchronicities and subconscious awareness and intuition and pattern recognition, right? And that's cool. That is kind of a way to break it down. That's one way of understanding it. But from the Afro Indigenous understanding, we don't call them signs the same way. All right. So the understanding is that it's ancestral communication, it's spiritual guidance. All right. It's messages from the unseen and its relationship with spirit. Spirit's not random, it's relational, it's intentional. So you can say in our tradition, spirit is always speaking, always. Okay. And if you are an Afro Indigenous person, you just know this. Once you start tapping into and developing these skills, these gifts, then you realize that this is something that you've always been doing. Okay. It's beyond pattern recognition, it's beyond intuition. It just is. It's just something that has to be developed, activated, and remembered. Okay. So, like I said, spirit is always speaking. And the question is, are you listening? All right. So, a lot of times we can hear something, but are we actually taking action on that? And this is how our ancestors communicate a lot of times through dreams, through the body, through repetition, and they communicate through nature, intuitive knowing. So in our tradition, spirit is not vague, right? Spirit is relational and spirit speaks and expects you to listen. All right. So we're going to get into that a little bit deeper. But as you can see, there's some similarities between the Afro Indigenous understanding and the Western understanding. However, the Western understanding, anytime that I do these definitions, if you go back to some of the past episodes, they almost always pull out any sort of connection to spirit or any kind of connection to ancestors, and they take it more on the scientific side. When you're starting to tap into things, particularly as melanated men and women, then you're starting to activate stuff that's inside of your DNA that existed long before there were words and terms. Now, the words and terms are helpful because it helps us to be able to understand today what was lost and what was taken and forgotten, I should say. So you can still use those terms. There's nothing wrong with that, but I like to break them down to kind of go a little deeper and allow us to be able to process and integrate things deeper. So now I'm going to break down what some of these signs are and what some of them may mean. And I guarantee you, if you start to tune in, a lot of this stuff you've already experienced. Okay. So one of the things is going to be ringing in the ears. All right. Lots of ringing in the ears. I remember I had an experience, and I talked about this in a podcast episode before when I was going through a major transformation. This was probably like, I think, 2023. Another one, you know what I'm saying? Like another transformation, because it's always ongoing, and my ears were ringing for like a year. I swear, like it was like this staticky kind of ringing in my ears, and I was to the point where I thought that maybe it was something else besides a sign. Okay, I was like, well, maybe it's tinnitus or something. And I come to find out that later on, as I continued to process that, there was my ancestors, my cosmic ancestors, trying to communicate and get tap into me on to get me online, because I was going through this major shift and this transformation to be ready for this age of Aquarius. So when that ringing started out initially, it was like kind of like a staticky, kind of like garbly kind of sound, but essentially it began to change and shift, in the tone of that and the frequency of that began to be a lot clearer, a lot sharper, a lot more, and a lot less constant. Okay. And there was a lot of stuff that I was doing in between there, but it definitely got my attention. Okay. It was like undeniable. I cannot deny that there's this stuff going on in my ear. So for some people, it may not be that intense. It may just be the ringing in the ear. It may be that tonality and that frequency sound. So when that happens, you want to pause for a minute, okay? Because there and take an energetic shift, right? It's tuning you in, okay? It's distracting you from whatever it is that's going on right now. It wants to get your attention, and so you have to start to kind of pull inward and be like, what's this about? This isn't a time to be like, hey, did you hear that? Like, because if you do that, then people are going to be like, no, and it's going to make you look odd. So really, it's for you to be able to pull internally into your internal realm and to be able to try to break down what's going on with you right now. So what am I thinking about? That's something to ask. What decision am I avoiding? What am I going through right now? Am I going through some sort of a transformation? And for me, I was at the time, but I wasn't getting it. And the transformation for me was about leaving this particular job, and I was just trying to hang on to it and do all this stuff. And like I said, I go into this in another podcast episode, but I had to get out of there at that moment, like, and I had to get out of there really soon to be able to slide into the next things that I was getting ready and prepared to do. So it may have something to do with what's going on with you in your life and the transformation that you're going with. A lot of times it could also mean your frequency is shifting, and that's absolutely what was going on with me, because after that, I soon started to get really heavy and deep back into my meditation practice. And as I started to continue my meditation practice, that ringing in the ear and tonality became much clearer. And I was able to receive a lot more downloads and transmissions for the next phase of the journey that I was headed into. So a lot of times, the ringing in the ears has to do with the frequency shifting. Spirit is always trying to get your attention, through that. You're receiving downloads. I think that anytime that there's some sort of a audible communication from the spirit realm where you can hear it like physically, that is definitely a loud resounding alarm, like, hey, you're not paying attention to the other signs. Okay, so we're going to give you something that you can hear physically. So definitely it's not something to be ignored. And at the same time, it can also mean that you're receiving downloads. So it's just really important that when the ringing of the ears happen, that you kind of just stop, pause, see what's going on at the time, and also see what messages you're receiving, see what it is that you're going through in your life at the time, see what type of transformations going on, or it could just be a frequency shift, and you would kind of feel that internally. Now, every time that your ears ring doesn't mean panic. Sometimes it means pause. Like I said, at first mine was going so much, it was enough annoying. And I was kind of like, rubbing my ear, like trying to get it to stop. And it would stop, but it was on and off pretty constant. And it was irritating until it was kind of like, I was like, okay, what is it that y'all want? I had to kind of really get to that level. All right. So like I said, just think about what you're thinking about and what decision you may be avoiding. All right. Now, something else I want to talk about, and I've talked about this in a couple of podcast episodes as well, is body sensations. All right, our ancestors, spirit team will speak to us in through the body. Our own intuition and body will speak to us. Like I said, once again, by the time we start having these physical signs, that's because we're not paying attention to the other ones. Okay, we're not as tuned inward as we should be to be able to hear things, or maybe we don't have set aside time for our spiritual practices and meditation, and for whatever reason, and we're just constantly distracted and we're constantly missing the signs. And so those physical interactions will start to happen to allow us to be like, hey, what's that? And catch our attention. So body sensations are not going to be random. A lot of times they come from both perspectives of the gut or the intuition. So sometimes people don't know about the intuition, but they know they gut feeling and they trust that. You know what I'm saying? They don't know all the Western and the Afro-Indigenous perspective of that. They just know they gut said, don't do this or do that. Chest tightening, a lot of times means misalignment. Heaviness equals a warning sometimes, or sometimes it could be draining. You just kind of have to really tune in and see what's going on in your inner world. Like, it's not a lot that a whole lot of outside people can really tell you about. It's something that you're going to have to really start to develop your skill set and trusting your intuition. We'll talk about that a little later. So, Afro-Indigenous, the body equals the archive. All right. This is our database comprised of thousands of years, and for some people, millions of years of information. All right. So, this is an archive that we have going on in our DNA, and the body is also the altar. For the Western side of things, the nervous system detects things before the mind. So, once again, the body is the altar. We talked about the tightening in the chest and the heaviness in the energetic warning. So, this connects us to our somatic awareness too. So we're hearing a lot about that, about nervous system healing and things like that. It's all interconnected, okay? So no matter what way you understand it, essentially it's going to bring you back around to the same point. All right. But anytime you're receiving body sensations, pay attention to that, okay? Pay attention to that. And that's going to help you along the way with not just intuitive signs, but also what's going on with your body, because your body speaks to you as well. A lot of times my body lets me know things because I'm more in tune. So my body will be like, hey, it's time to do a detox. Or my body will say, hey, you need more water. Or, things like that. So I pay attention to as well on how to take care of my physical temple as well. So the repeating numbers, this is probably the one that a lot of people are experiencing the most, and particularly over the past year or so. So seeing repeating numbers doesn't mean anything without action. Okay. Once again, like, you got to do the work. You got to do something behind it. You got to start to take these signs, this information that you're receiving from spirit, the ancestors, and the universe, and you got to start to integrate that shit into your life. Okay. Because when a person is seeing these number signs, that is communication from the spirit realm. All right. What is it saying? What does it mean to you? It's not really something that you can go take to somebody else. You can ask somebody else, and somebody can kind of give you a generic definition. But at the end of the day, everything needs to be coming from inside of you. All right. So, what was I focused on when I saw this? This is going to be very similar and repetitive to some of the stuff that we talked about before with the other things, like with the body sensations and the ringing in the ears. You need to stop and go in, basically. What was I focused on when I saw this? What was happening? Where am I at? Like, where am I at in my life? Where am I at physically right now? Your frequency is shifting. And that's another thing I noticed as well. In the beginning of my journey, I used to see numbers all the time, right? And it became a thing that it was like, okay, you just see numbers periodically. And then I stopped and I started receiving other kind of signs. But during around the same time that my ears was ringing, and once I started tuning into, okay, there must be more going on with these ears ringing, then I started seeing numbers number signs. It was like, yes, yes, you're on the right path. You're definitely getting this. And this was all happening during a time that my frequency was shifting. Spirit was trying to get my attention once again. I started receiving downloads because I could hear now because I was paying attention. And so every time your ears ring and every time that you see repeating numbers, it doesn't mean panic. It just means pause. It doesn't mean go run and go ask somebody what's that about. It means go with inside of you. Okay. And sometimes it's best to just ask spirit directly. I'll never forget that. Um, that's when I have the most um my experience is the most impactful when I just be like straight up, like just talking to them like this, like, okay, what is it that you want me to know? Because I feel like I'm missing something, and just really, and they're like, oh, finally you listen. Now we can go ahead and put a whole mouthful in there. So dreams is another one. Dreams are direct messages from the ancestors and the spirit team. Okay, they're warnings. They're processing information. In many of our traditions, dreams were a doorway. In many African traditions, dreams are ancestral communication, guidance, and warnings, not just random brain activity. We actually talked about this a little bit yesterday in the class. And we are astral traveling. Okay. Once the body needs rest. Okay. The spirit and the soul do not. So the body needs to rest. What happens to the spirit and the soul? They go off journeying into different dimensions and things like that. So a lot of times, if you're having lucid dreaming, if you're receiving messages from ancestors and spirit guides or warnings, that is direct communication. Where they're able to reach you in a way where your mind is not in the way. Okay. Your brain activity of the active consciousness and distractions of the day are not in the way. So they absolutely mean something. So there's lots of things that you need to do with that as also take action. You want to write those down. You want to start, if you're lucid enough inside of your dreams, ask questions. And I'll never forget this when I first started experiencing lucid dreaming. This was a while back, and I kept having this dream, and it was creepy. Okay. And it wasn't creepy like, ghouls and goblins. It was just like I was on the couch and I was falling asleep. I was dozing off. I had a big dog at the time, and he was like across the room laying down on the floor sleeping. And I felt myself dozing off. And then I would hear myself talking in the other room. Okay, that's what I mean by creepy. So to me, and I was like, "What?" And I thought I was dozing off, and then I would wake up. And so that was even creepier, right? So I remember I kept having that dream, and so I'm like, "Okay, I thought I was dozing off." And I did that like 3 or 4 times in a row. And then I was like, I started kind of getting a little scared. And so I was like in the dream lucid, and then all of a sudden there was like these people, coming in and out of the door. And these were people that I knew, but just like random people in my life, like throughout my life. And I'm like, okay, so why are these people here? And they kept coming in, and then they would shut the door and they would come in, and then I would have the dream about dozing off, but really be asleep. And it was like, it was wild until finally I was like, okay, what is it that you want me to know? And when I did that, like the dream faded away and it went into a different part of the dream, and it started giving me messages. And it was as if they wanted me to be lucid enough to start to ask questions to receive the information. So that's just one example I had a long time ago, and it's random. But ever since then, I have learned that if there's something that I'm like, okay, what is it? I'm confused. I lack clarity. I just ask them straight up. Okay, what is it that you want me to know? What is it that you want me to know? So yeah, that's something like dreams will help you with. That can help you in your dreams. If you're lucid in your dreams, just ask them, what is it? What's the message you have for me? Instead of trying to figure it all out later and piecemeal all these puzzle pieces. Okay. Now here's another one that's really, really important. And this one probably gets missed a lot. And this one is repeating life patterns. Okay. Patterns are going to be a big one. Okay. This can come in the form of relationship types, emotional cycles, and same outcomes. This is not a coincidence. That's communication. All right. Repeated patterns in your life can be the same type of partner. You just keep choosing badly. It could be the same type of situation. You keep putting yourself in the similar situation, different people, different place, same type of disappointment. Man, why does this keep happening to me? Why does this always happen to me? That's not a coincidence. That's a message. That's a message that there's a pattern that needs to be healed. There's some transformation that's necessary there. And the lesson is going to continue to come until you master that lesson. So yeah, pay attention also not only to the body signs, the dreams, the intuition, but the repeated patterns. Now, this is also going to be something that comes from inside of you. Like, don't nobody know that but you. We're not running around here telling people these deep, dark aspects of ourselves. This is stuff that we have to integrate and go through our own shadow work and transform on our own. This is not the side of ourselves that we show people, all right? Even if you're in a relationship, we all have a private part of our life, all right? So pay attention to all of those things because it's all signs and it does no good to get signs if you ain't gonna do nothing about it. Like seriously, because all you're gonna do is continuously get signs, okay? You're just going to keep getting signs everywhere. And then it's just like, well, why you keep getting signs? Because you haven't changed anything. The signs haven't changed. All right. So now I want to move on to the next part. Okay. Because like I just pretty much said this. Let's be real. You already know. You already know. That's the thing. If you tune in, you know what these things are about. All right. If you quiet the distractions, you take some time for your spiritual practices, whatever that means for you, journaling, going into nature, meditation, whatever that is for you, then you already know what it is. You just have to kind of break down the information. Just like you know in those relationship patterns, you know who's not for you. You know what situation is over. You know when it's time to walk away. But instead of moving, you're asking for a sign. It's like the situation is the sign. You know what I'm saying? Like we want to break everything down and we want everything to be you know, like spoon fed to us a lot of times instead of using our own spiritual compass and inner resource. Now, here's the thing: the universe and your ancestors and spirit guides will give you most signs. All right, you can sit there and pull more cards and you can wait for confirmation, and then guess what happens? You start to get confused, and then guess what happens? You're just avoiding it and you're bypassing doing the work because you don't need no more signs. You need to walk away. And if you're having problems walking away, you need to find out and look inside of yourself. Where does this lead from? Why am I afraid to walk away? Well, I need some strength to do this. All right. Most people are waiting on clarity and avoiding responsibility. That's spiritual bypassing. We can't say that we want to grow, we want to transform, we want to do something different, and then we get the signs, and then we just like, okay, wait a minute, I need another one. It's like I'm gonna run another card. You know what? Wait a minute, I'm gonna go to this reader. I'm gonna go to this teacher. All of that's bypassing. Like you don't make a difference how many teachers you go to. Doesn't make a difference how many readings you get if you're not going to actually take action on it and do work. All right. And then a lot of times what'll happen, and I know this has happened to me for with my ancestors, is a spirit will go silent. Okay. This part right here, spirit doesn't stop speaking randomly. But once you keep ignoring the signs, okay, you keep asking the same thing over and over, you keep getting a different sign in a different way, then they'll just get quiet. And the reason they get quiet is because you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to go through every last one of those signs. You're going to be thinking about all them signs, all the things that you know, using your intuition. And then you're going to be like, that's what they was trying to tell me. They be like, yeah. Like they was like, we tried to give it to you like 17 different ways, but so essentially they'll get silent because at the end of the day, they can only be of guidance. You know what I'm saying? You have to use your intuition. So when you ignore guidance repeatedly, when you override your intuition, because your intuition is always on point. We always talked about that. Because even when you do start to finally break through this stuff and you start to say, oh man, I knew it. You're like, I knew it. You did. You knew it a long time ago, but you went ahead and overrode your own intuition. All right. So when you ask but don't act, the signal gets quieter. And I know that there's been times, and sometimes this will be when you ain't supposed to know things right away. Like sometimes you're supposed to do one part before you know the other part. You're supposed to go through it to get through it. And instead, you're trying to find the outcome out. I've done this plenty of times, honey. My ancestors will get super quiet. Okay. They'll be like, we ain't telling you nothing else because that's not where we at. We're not at that part yet. So, they'll get quiet on you. Don't, especially if you start taking for granted, doesn't mean they won't come back. It just means that they'll just stop saying the same thing until you start to actually do something to implement it. So from an Afro-Indigenous land, relationship requires respect. Okay, so this is a respect and a relationship that we're building with our spirit guides and our ancestors. They're here to guide us and help us. We don't want to just take that for granted, that they just always going to be there and they're just going to keep on giving us signs and you ain't going to do nothing about it. All right, so it's a mutual relationship and respect is necessary. So guidance requires a response. So if I'm giving you guidance, just like if a person, in the physical plane was giving you guidance, they're gonna want to know that you're gonna actually respond to it, or they're gonna stop trying to help you. Is what's the point, communication is also reciprocal. So if you don't respond, the conversation changes, right? It gets quiet. It's like, or you just can't hear it anyway. And response is by doing the work and making the changes and integrating the guidance into your life. So from a Western lens, this looks like weaken the trust in your intuition. Now that's a big one. So you end up harming yourself, right? It's not just about, oh, now all of a sudden I can't hear. It's about the fact that you don't trust your own intuition, and that's why you don't know nothing. So when the signs are coming and but you're like, I don't know, I need to go get another reading. I need to go to this person. So that's going to end up weakening your intuition. And now you're walking around here with a weak intuition and you don't trust nothing. You're confused about everything. You don't have any clarity. You're scared to act, so you actually end up harming yourself. So that's kind of why the ancestors get quiet too, because it's like, well, shit, if you ain't going to trust your intuition and nothing that I say is going to get through anyway, you need to fix that first, you need to fix that first. So you also train your brain to ignore signals, right? And so then all of a sudden you ain't even getting those signals. You're not even getting any sign. Every time you ignore your intuition, you disconnect from yourself. You begin to live more outwardly than inwardly. Now all of a sudden you're more focused on all the external things and you become an NPC. And that's just bottom line. That's facts. You become an NPC. You're no longer receiving these messages, these downloads, these transmissions. Your intuition, don't do that, don't go there. That guy's not right for you. That girl's not right for you. So you end up disconnecting from yourself. So spirit doesn't go silent because it left you. It goes quiet because you stop honoring what you heard. All right. It's important for you to learn that lesson as well. Because once you get that lesson, I promise you, you won't forget it. All right. So the real issue here, and this is a big one, big one, big one, is fear. All right. Fear, fear, fear. All right. People are so afraid. And it goes back to what I said about the intuition, overriding your intuition and not trusting your intuition. That's the only time that there's fear, is because you don't trust what's coming inside of you. If you don't trust what's coming in from inside of you, then you're not going to trust your ancestors. You're not going to trust your spirit guides. And the crazy thing about it is a lot of times we'll go and trust other people. That's wild. You're going to trust somebody else, to be your guide. And that's why a big part of what I do is to help to guide people back to their ancestors. It's not for you to come to me. I'm going to send you right on back over there to your ancestors and let them help you to guide you, or help you to be able to strengthen your intuition and be able to start to tap into your own internal realm, because you got a powerhouse inside of you. All right. So fear a lot of times um, causes us to miss the signs, all right? Because we're fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of discomfort, fear of losing what's familiar, stepping into the unknown. All of that stuff sounds like a lot of healing work. Because once you start to heal those things, you no longer fear anything from survival patterns, from old unhealed wounds, all right? So a lot of times it requires a lot of shadow work and a lot of healing work. Okay. So I definitely did a podcast episode on healing as ancestral technology, where we really broke down how really everything starts with healing. A lot of times we try to skip steps as well. A lot of times the signs may be coming to us because it's time to heal. It's time to stop playing games out here in these streets and start healing. It's time to stop bypassing and try to run to this topic and that topic, where really you need to focus on the inner healing, because that's going to make the space in the room for you to be able to receive more downloads, transmissions, strengthen your intuition, feel strong and confident, and have clarity about what it is that you're receiving. And it's actually going to just enhance everything all across the board. So instead of moving forward, fear will have you in a loop of ask, receive, ignore, repeat. That's spiritual stagnation. That is spiritual bypassing, and it just gets you nowhere. It just continues the loop. You just start all over again. I know I need to do this, and I know, and you'll hear people say this. I know I need to do this. You just said it. Like, you know what I'm saying? I know I need to do this. What do I need to do? And they don't even realize that. And I used to be like that in the beginning too, but I'm just grateful for some of the teachers that I had, because they just was like, girl, if you don't get out there and do it. Or I had some teachers that would straight up tell me at a certain point, they was like, there's nothing else that I can teach you. At this point, you need to just go out here and live that. And I would be like, I thought you were supposed to help me, but they did. And I'm grateful that they did, just like that. And so I would have to go navigate my little life and receive the information with inside of myself and start to trust that and build that relationship with my ancestors and my spirit guides so that I could also trust the guidance that they were given as well. So yeah, so fear is a big one, but like I said, that first part of the fears of being alone and change and discomfort, that a lot of that stuff is directly connected to healing. And without doing the necessary healing to be able to strengthen those things, you're just in a loop and spiritual bypassing. So now I want to talk about what to do instead. All right. Instead of getting the signs, going in a loop, bypass spiritual bypassing, staying stuck and staying the same. Next time you see a sign, whether that's numbers, whether that's your body is telling you something, stop. All right. Stop what you're doing. Really pull inwards. Allow that to be training grounds for you to be able to start to strengthen your gifts, strengthen your intuition, hear what's going on, hear the messages, see the sounds, and start to build a relationship with your ancestors and your spirit team. Don't try to figure out the how of everything right away. Don't try to figure out the who, what, why, how, and where, because that creates the confusion. Just start simple. Start by stopping and listening and going in. And you may have to ask, what is it that you want me to know? Or whatever comes up for you. Um, or what am I being asked to do right now? I always say, what is it that you want me to know? Because that covers all of them. You know what I'm saying? What does this mean spiritually? What action is required? What is it that you want me to know? That covers everything, to me. And then I'll start to receive information. So notice the signs and connect it to your current situation. You'll start to see the patterns. You'll start to see the connecting dots. You'll be like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's what that was about. Oh, I get it. And you'll start to kind of fill in the gaps and everything. And it'll be very specific and unique to you. It'll be better than any reading you could ever get. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not against people getting readings. Hell, I give consultations and readings as well because sometimes there's situations that you may need clarity. Clarity is different than receiving information and the signs and they're still going to ask somebody else because you want a different answer. It's having some sort of idea about what's going on, but missing something. Like you're really trying to move towards this. You think you got this, but it seems like, you may be missing something. So sometimes you need clarity and it helps to have an outside trusted source that can kind of look into that for you to give you the missing link. So that kind of situation is totally different. And that's actually helpful and beneficial. So yeah, take one aligned action. All right. We don't have to do it all at once. We don't have to do it in a rush. We don't have to catch up with her or her. We just need to make sure that we're moving forward and progressing and transforming. So you could choose one aligned action based on what your specific situation is. All right. So the bottom line is, and the whole purpose of this episode is you don't need another sign, honey. Okay. You need to go ahead and start to integrate into your life the signs that you've already received. All right, so spirit is not confusing. You're avoiding. All right, your body speaks before the mind understands. Patterns are messages. Know that. Patterns are messages that create a story. That's what's dope about that. So, what may start out like, what the hell? I don't understand that. And another piece of the message, and and all of a sudden, it gives a well rounded story over time if you actually give it a chance to. So you're not supposed to know everything right away with some stuff. You're supposed to kind of put the pieces together and recognize that. You already know. That's a good one right there. You already know. Remember that. Your intuition already knows. And action is the response to guidance. All right. This is also how you start to strengthen that relationship with your ancestors and your spirit guides. Because now it says that I trust, not only my intuition, but I trust the guidance that I receive and they can help you even more. All right. And then courage is the missing step. Recognize that there is fear a lot of times in all of this, particularly if you're at the beginning and you're new. I recognize that and I honor that too. So just know that, A, you're not alone, because pretty much all of us that started this out, we all were in the same kind of boat. But essentially, you have to get to a place where you begin to trust that inner knowing inside of you, because it's powerful and it just needs to be trusted and developed over time. So the more spiritual bypassing that you do, the more it actually goes silent. You start trusting it. All right. So hopefully everybody got something out of this episode. I absolutely did not want to spend a whole lot of time on this one. So I kept this one sweet and short, because it was punchy, it was powerful, and it was impactful, just as short as it was. All right. So if you have any questions, you know what to do. Drop those in the comment section. You can actually reach out to me on my website as well. And then I'll also go ahead and put a plug in for the podcast guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the Holistic and Spiritual AF podcast, please do reach out. I actually have a form on the website, holisticandspiritualaf.com. I would love to try to bring some new energy and some new blood in here. And then I'm also going to bring some of our guests back as repeats for like part two, because we had a lot of people talking some serious stuff, man. So with that being said, that is it. Until the next episode. Peace.